Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and we'll have a few people continuing to log in, and of course we'll be sharing our video around, and so depending on how you're joining us, we're just glad to have you here with us today. And I am delighted that I am joined today by Dr. Stephen Deworth, who is the Dean of the Rossin College of Engineering and Applied Science at Lehigh University. My name is Cheryl Matherly. I'm the Vice President and Vice Provost for International Affairs, and we have been hosting these series, what we're calling our Lehigh Leadership Series, this fall as a way to introduce some of the Lehigh leadership and also give an idea of some of our priorities at the university to all of our India alums, students, potential students, partners, colleagues, our greater Lehigh community of friends in India. And so today, I'm so pleased that Dean Deworth has agreed to join us to talk about some of the priorities of what is happening in the College of Engineering. And so we'll be talking today for probably about 20 minutes or so. I invite, as you've got questions, to put those in the chat, and we'll make sure we save a few minutes at the end for that conversation as well. Just by way of introduction, Dean Deworth joined Lehigh in September of 2016. And previous to that, he had been at Georgia Tech University. He was a professor and founding faculty in the Wallace H. Coulter Department of Biomedical Engineering at Georgia Tech and Emory University. He was a professor in Georgia Tech School of Electrical and Computer Engineering and served as Associate Dean of Research and Innovation for its College of Engineering. His own research has focused on the development of real-time models of interfaces and neural sensory motor systems, particularly systems that control rhythmic movement. He is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and he is and of the American Institute of Medical and Biological Engineering. He received his PhD in computational and neural systems from the California Institute of Technology, and from there took his first appointment there at Georgia Tech. He was also, interestingly, was the founding chair of the Department of Biomedical Engineering at Khalifa University in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. And so I would say it was great fun. Steve, I think, joined Lehigh. I think you joined maybe 6 months after I did. So I always sort of consider us both sort of fellow newbies at the university. And I'm going to add just something else kind of personal about Steve as well. He was with us when we first really started looking at Lehigh's opportunities in India. And it was back in January of 2017. Steve, I think that you made your first trip to India with us when we had a small delegation that went to meet with some universities and with some alums. And I thought it might be fun just to do a quick share with some of the people on the call. The highlight of that trip, as you recall, was that we had an opportunity to meet with alums at Ambassador Richard Verma's home, who, of course, for those who don't know, Rich Verma is a Lehigh alum and a graduate of your college. And so we had this, I'll just show some quick slides here of this. We had a nice reception, and you see it there. Steve's looking nice, cheery there. Rich is there, and Ambassador Verma there is in the center. We're also joined with Lisa Getzler, who's the director of the Baker Institute. Steve, as I recall, you were getting over the flu, and I think that may be where the expression there is, but you're with some of the alums of the Technical Entrepreneurship Program and that. But looking much chipper when you're here getting to talk to the alums about the priorities going on in the college. And then just you can see we just had a really nice event there for that. And I just thought that was just sort of a nice memory about that, because I think actually our original plans this spring is that this prior to COVID was that you were actually going to make a return visit, I think in April or May, with us to go back to visit with some partners on that. So I'll end with that. So with that, I think it's time to get to talking about what's going on there in the Rossin College and that. So welcome. I think maybe a starting place then is, as I said, we were originally supposed to be making a trip back to India together this spring, but obviously a lot of things sort of intervened in that. And the most recent issue of the College of Engineering's Resolve magazine really did a nice job of talking about all the response to COVID from your college. Um, could you talk some about that? How did your college respond? What happened, and what have you done on that?
Thank you, Cheryl, and welcome to all of you who are joining us this evening or this morning where we are. I'm really happy to be with you. So yeah, it has been, as I'm sure it has for you, a wild 8 months. When we, during the middle of our spring break, Lehigh decided that we needed to close down for the remainder of the spring semester. So in the middle of March, with 4 days notice, we went fully online with all of our courses. Our research labs closed, and we went into pretty much lockdown mode. And so, in a sense, if I think about a response to the crisis, the most amazing part of it is that our faculty members and our students pivoted with 4 days notice and did a wonderful job of finishing out that spring semester. And that in itself was a grand accomplishment. And so I'm really proud of what everyone has done there. But we didn't stop with just making sure that we were continuing to deliver our educational programs. We put in serious effort to make sure that we could reopen our research labs as quickly as possible. And it was about the 1st of June that we were able to reopen our research labs, and that we pivoted with some of our research to look at research that would help support addressing the pandemic. A couple of examples. So one was, we were approached by local hospitals who said, we have a shortage of face masks and other PPE, and we don't have how can you help us deal with this? And a group of our faculty members who work in the photonics area built a UV sterilization system that allowed the hospitals to sterilize their face masks and other PPEs quickly and effectively, so that they could reuse these single-use devices. And so it was a great contribution sort of to our local community, and had a real effect there. And then, on the other end of the scale, we have one of our large research groups that's really just an outstanding group of faculty members and students doing research in catastrophe modeling. So they look at catastrophes of all sorts, and they look at resilience and how resilient structures are needed to respond to these catastrophes. Well, they pivoted immediately and focused all of their efforts on the pandemic. Clearly a catastrophe worth modeling, so to speak, and addressing. And so we have this great group led by one of our faculty members, Paolo Bocchini, in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and that group was able to really move their research in that direction, and will continue to do so for years to come. At this point, we'll continue to focus on this area. In the unfortunate chance that something like this happens again, we'll be much more ready to know how to address the bigger issues. So that's all been great. And I'll just go back to education to say one more brief thing, and that is, it's been a real challenge to figure out how to deliver curricula both on campus. About half of our students are on campus, and off campus, remotely. But we've also learned a lot. And so one of the things that we're focused on right now is, what did we learn about how to be better educators that will exist beyond the pandemic? That we're all hoping, of course, there's a beyond the pandemic, but that what can we do to be better educators, learning from what we've learned through this COVID period. And so it has been challenging, but it's also been just it's been wonderful to watch the faculty and students move forward through this and do new and important things. So
yeah. In fact, Steve, one of your faculty, Ganesh Balasubramanian, actually spoke as part of a panel for the Education USA, the US India Education Foundation, about that experience of learning to move to deliver instruction in a remote setting, and on all that we learned about that as being sort of a model of good practice there. And so to your point, we did learn an awful lot at that I think one of the things that you've really made as a priority as your time of dean is sort of a return to looking at what are both the strengths of the college, and then how do you build that into some new directions. And I think that's best seen in the work that's happened with these interdisciplinary research institutes, which of course are not exclusive to the Rossin College, but certainly are being led in some really important ways on that. Could you talk a little bit about that direction and what the particular focus areas of the IRIs, how they came about, and how you see that as part of the next directions of the college?
Right. So when I came to Lehigh, one of the first things that we did was sort of a deep dive into understanding where research opportunities for research growth existed in the college, but also in the university. So I call it a college-centric but university-wide effort. And so it was clear that we needed to increase the research funding that we bring in from the federal government and other sources in order to truly succeed. We have an outstanding faculty, but we don't have enough research funding to truly meet the needs. So we started a process when this all happened, or when I first arrived, we started a process of what I called an envisioning process for the college. And the biggest focus of that envisioning process was to look at what were the areas that we felt, with proper investment and building on the strengths that we have already, what were the areas that we felt that we could really move in and be a national and international leader 10, 20 years down the road. And, as we look toward the future of research at Lehigh. And so we ended up picking 3 areas, and 2 of them build very much on Lehigh's current strengths and also on Lehigh's historical strengths. So the first is the Institute for Functional Materials and Devices. So Lehigh has a strong history in material science research, as many of you know, and we built on that, but also looking at how do we take these kinds of technologies and translate them into new devices and sensors and different kinds of approaches to so I have to apologize if you hear barking in the background. Those are my dogs who are outside the door right now. But so anyway, building on our strength of materials, but really looking to the future, what new materials we need to be going after, as well as how those materials will be used. The second institute is the Institute for Cyber-Physical Infrastructure and Energy. It's a long name, but if we break it down, I think it's really important to do that. So first of all, in the middle of that is infrastructure. And again, one of the great strengths of Lehigh is infrastructure and structural engineering primarily within our Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, but it crosses much more broadly than that. And so we looked at infrastructure, but not infrastructure in the traditional way. I like to think about, in the breaking big pieces of concrete and steel. We still do that, and we still care about those kind of structural qualities of materials. But we also are focused on bringing. So it's cyber physical. So bringing the cyber part, the data science and related areas to bear on physical systems, on infrastructure. And in the U.S., we talk a lot about how we have a huge effort ahead of us in rebuilding our infrastructure for the future. And this will require much more than just the physical engineering. It will require data science. Matter of fact, we are working closely with social scientists around this, because the built environment is built for us, right? And if we don't figure out how it affects the human condition, then we're missing some of our opportunities. So bringing physical systems with data science, with social science together, this institute is focused around the environment, around infrastructure, but also around energy. And that was the last word in that, the cyber physical infrastructure and energy, because so much of what we do in infrastructural space is focused around energy, renewable energy. We have amazing research going on, for example, in hydrokinetic energy, extracting energy from the oceans, in essence, from waves and tides. And so that's what that institute is about. And then both of those institutes really rely on a strength of data science, which like for most places, is not one of Lehigh's historical areas of strength, but we have an amazing industrial and systems engineering department that's very computational and very focused on optimization and related areas. We have a growing computer science department, so important to the future of of our fields. And so, putting all of that together, we built a third institute, which is the Institute for Data, Intelligent Systems, and Computation, IDISC. And IDISC is focused on exactly that, on growing our strengths in data science, in machine learning, in artificial intelligence, in data analytics, and really building on our strengths in industrial systems engineering, in computer science and engineering, in electrical computer engineering, and many of our other departments, and looking at how we take these data techniques and apply them to real world problems. And so we built these three institutes, and really what they are is they're incubators for centers. What we want to do is they are places where groups of faculty members can come together around hard problems, grand challenges that are facing society, come up with great ideas, and then the IRIs, these research institutes, help to leverage what those ideas and to support those groups, to facilitate, to incubate those groups so that they can write highly competitive, large scale proposals and go after large funding from, again, the federal government and our other funding sources. And I will say one last point, in that all of this is done in partnership with industry, because we know that if we're really going to go after these big problems, it has to be that triumvirate, right? It has to be the university, the government, and industry all working together toward common goals. And so each of these institutes has a set of industrial partners that they work closely with toward these directions.
Yeah, and it's been an exciting development to watch that. And at the same time, and these, of course, are also driving some of I know how we're thinking about places and opportunities for graduate students as well, because they're certainly involved with the research piece to all this. And at the same time, I know you're also spending quite a bit of time thinking about the undergraduate experience at this. Could you talk some about where you're seeing the direction of the undergraduate learning going as well?
So I think there's a lot of talk today in academia, in engineering education, about experiential learning. Mm-hmm. And it is critically important. And I'll talk about what it actually means in a minute. But I will say, before I even get started with that Lehigh has been a place, as those of you who are alums know, a place that's done experiential learning for decades. And we've always been on this front, but a big part of what we're looking at now is how do we embed experiential learning into the education of every one of our students, both inside their curricula and outside. So what is experiential learning? Well, I'm going to give you sort of a high, the big picture as I see it. Experiential learning is those opportunities that students have for hands-on, often team-based learning that builds on the fundamentals that they're learning in their curriculum, in their courses, but also helps them to explore their own passions, to envision where they might take their education toward their career, and really gives them a chance to look at hard, real-world problems that really will have an impact on the world. Our students come to us today. Certainly I didn't when I started undergraduate, did not come and say, I want to have an impact on the world while I'm an undergraduate student. I thought, I want to get a degree and leave here and then go do the things I will do. And our students come to us wanting to have an impact while they're on campus. And this is just a wonderful opening for us to do projects with them in the research labs. I mean, a wonderful way for undergraduates to have an impact is to be part of research that's changing the face of our fields, but also things like our Mountaintop Initiative, where they're doing creative inquiry with broadly interdisciplinary teams around many international problems. I mean, a lot of the work that goes on there and led by our faculty is problems that are addressing issues that with groups all over the world. And I think this is exciting for our students to be able to have this impact, to be able to have it on in an international setting, to be able to do it with our faculty members, but also explore some of their own passions and their directions that they think are exciting. So, and this is, I will argue this is sort of been our biggest investment in undergraduate education since I came, was to do this. And as I said, both inside and outside the curriculum. And so inside the curriculum, where the faculty members, of course, have pretty strong control over what happens, we're working more and more to get our faculty members, or our faculty members are excited to, I should say, to embed experiential learning into their courses, to change the pedagogy, the way that they actually facilitate learning in our students, so that the students have these rich learning environments in the classroom, and going beyond just the faculty member standing up in front of a lecture hall 3 times a week. But it's much more about working in teams again, working with the faculty members more closely, with TAs and all of this, to have this sort of team-based approach to problem solving in the curriculum. And so we're investing in that as well.
That's exciting to see that. And I know that number of these initiatives, well, not everything with the experiential has been international. A lot of it has, and that's certainly been a place where we've seen some really exciting opportunities, and it certainly are informing some of the discussions we're having with some potential partnering universities here in India and that. So when you look down the road, what do you see then as the priorities for the college over the next 5 years?
So one of them is the priority, I'll say, over the last 5 years, our top priority, and that is to grow our research, its impact, and the reputation that comes with that for Lehigh. So we want to continue to invest in the growth of research. We have a new provost, Nathan Urban, who is very committed to growing research at Lehigh. And this is, this remains a top priority for us. And the place that we really need to invest now, the place that we're moving, is around helping, like I said before, helping these teams really be able to compete on a national and international stage, and to make sure that we have the facilities and the resources for them to do that. So that's one. Another one is growth of our graduate programs. We need to grow both our master's programs and our doctoral programs. And I have told our faculty that our highest priority this year, I won't say it's a new priority, but it has definitely been pushed to the top of the list, is to grow our master's programs. It's really, there's such an opportunity, especially with online learning. There's such an opportunity to have an impact on students after they finish their undergraduate degrees, and to offer them, we talk about lifelong learning, and I don't know how I feel about that phrase, but it is really, that's what it is in a sense, right? Is to give students a chance to have other opportunities. So it could be master's degrees, it could be graduate certificates, and we're looking to figure out how can we do that both on our campus. That's, Lehigh's, kind of stock and trade is, this on-campus experience, but also in looking at how we can deliver more and more of our programs remotely in a very robust and holistic way that really is worthy of a Lehigh education. And so that's another big focus for us. And then I also said growing doctoral programs, and in order to grow our research, we have to grow our doctoral programs. And so it's critically important that we be able to recruit the best and brightest students from all over the world. And I have to say, I didn't mention it earlier when we were talking about COVID, but this year was a challenge for us on that front, particularly in recruiting international master's and PhD students, because of the pandemic, because of immigration issues that in our country, but also that were directly a result of the pandemic. And we had a large number of first-year master's and PhD students who wanted to come to Lehigh and weren't able to be with us. And so we did everything we could to make sure that they could study online from home until they're able to come to Lehigh. Some of them came in the fall, others will join us in the spring, but some will not be able to make it until next fall. But we have made sure that every one of our programs, and again, on very short notice, we made sure that every one of our programs had courses available in the summer, because that was important for this. They had all of their courses, or as many as possible. Almost all of their courses were available online. And then we worked with the students to figure out how we can deal with their individual financial needs. We wanted to make sure that master students who typically pay for their degree at Lehigh were not going to have to pay more because they had to do an extra semester, and could stay on and do get their OPT certification so they could stay in the US and work after they get their degree. So we worked with them on restructuring that and making sure that we managed costs for them and gave them that opportunity to work in the US if that's what they wanted to do. For our PhD students, we wanted to make sure that they, typically they would come here and they would be paid employees of the university. And we figured out how to make sure that we could, waive tuition as much as possible so that they could, again, study from home and then join us when they were able. And this just, this goes hand in hand with the clear knowledge that we cannot afford to lose the opportunity to recruit the very best students, even in the middle of a pandemic. And so it was I was going to say, I should say it is, because we're still actively working on this for next semester. It is a high priority for us to keep as many of those students engaged at Lehigh this year, and as we move forward.
Yeah, and you all were very, very, very responsive and creative at coming up with quick responses to address what was the very real situation we were dealing with a lot of our students around there. When we started talking, when Lehigh first began sort of reevaluating this strategy of thinking about, regions of the world we needed to be really focused in and being globally engaged in, and India very much came to the front for a number of reasons. You were really with us right from the beginning and thinking about this. So from your college perspective, what is it that you're seeing? How is it that you're envisioning, or how do you anticipate that our focus and our commitment to really being, involved in India, how does that relate to your college priorities?
Well, I see the opportunity in India twofold. But before I say that, I just see India as, if I look around the world in places that we need to have a bigger presence, that we need to really commit Lehigh resources to building partnerships, India is on the top of my list. I feel like there's so much opportunity, and we need to tap into that. And it's really in two areas. I mean, it's in student recruitment, getting more students from India to come to Lehigh, and then it's in building partnerships, particularly research partnerships with institutes and universities in India, as well as with companies. And so those are sort of the two big areas. So let me speak to each of those a little bit. So on the student recruiting side, I talked just now about the importance of growth of our master's and PhD programs. We know that, we will not be able to grow at the rate that we want to grow if we don't engage more in India. We need to see, a larger number of students coming from there. And so we are building partnerships with universities to do this. As you probably know, we have two people on the ground in India who are working for Lehigh to build all of this. Cheryl mentioned Ganesh Balasubramanian earlier, who is one of our faculty members who has taken on the task of sort of being our point person for our relationship in India. And all of this is really primarily around being able to make sure we make those connections with Indian universities so that we see more ability to bring students to Lehigh, to share students, to have joint programs and other kinds of programs where we can share students. And so, for example, we have agreements with IIT Kharagpur and IIT Ropar for undergraduate and graduate student exchanges that we're developing. And these are the kinds of programs that, we hope, hey, if we get undergraduate students to come to Lehigh and spend some time, maybe they'll come back and do a master's degree or do a PhD. And this is outstanding. And I know the university has, as do we, a goal to really get the best and brightest undergraduate students to come to Lehigh as well. And so that's a big piece. And then the second piece, like I said, is focused on building partnerships, particularly around research. And if I look at some of the priorities of the Indian government, smart cities, clean and renewable energy, disaster resilience, climate change, these are all these are all priorities that we have at Lehigh in the Rossin College as well. And so, you heard me say earlier, and it wasn't tailored for an Indian audience, that the topics I talked about earlier in our institutes are very tied to these areas. And so we see real opportunity to build partnerships that can not just generate more students coming from India to Lehigh, or student partnerships, but also real partnerships around, again, these grand challenge problems that face us all. And so one of the things that's happening right now is we're preparing to sign at the end of this month an agreement with IIT Bombay that will, first of all, be looking toward getting, again, student exchanges and more student interaction, but we also hope will have really longer term impact around building research partnerships. And that's the first of what I hope will be, I won't say many, I think we need to be careful. We're a small place, Lehigh, and we can't overextend ourselves. But I will say the first of a targeted number of really strong partnerships with Indian institutions that will be in the best interest of both institutions as well as both countries.
Right. I think we have time for maybe a couple questions. If we've got people who want to ask some questions, you can either stick it in the chat box, raise your hand, we'll take that. And I just want to add one other thing, Steve, to what you were saying there about the cooperation we're doing with the Indian institutions. What I think has also been really exciting about our approach, and again, to where, the commitment with your faculty in this, is that everything really has been reciprocal, that we're looking at both clearly how it's playing to strengths and what we're trying to build, but also how that complements and works with the right partners. And even in these exchange agreements, we're looking at things that are, back to your experiential comment, of opportunities to be able to create spaces for our students to be able to come over and work on research projects and collaborate as part of teams with Indian colleagues as well. And it's been really exciting to see that whole piece kind of come together and see that sort of build in some of these really interesting areas.
Yeah, and I'll have to say that I use the word partnership very explicitly, because a partnership is a two-way connection that has to meet the needs of both entities, right? And this is critical to us, and we know this. It's not just about Lehigh recruiting students, right? And unless it's to the benefit of the university that we're working with. So. Yeah.
Well, we've got a couple questions here that are both sort of related to graduate studies, and the first one is a question about kind of financial aid for supporting for doctoral students, and this is a question that's very specific. I'm looking like a student who's going to be hoping to start in fall of 21 with some very specific questions, but maybe you could talk about sort of more generally about how are we supporting graduate students, how you're looking at that. This is obviously a big question for any of our international graduate students.
I think it's a big question for any of our doctoral students. I mean, this is a doctoral degree is a longer degree. You could say it's typically 5 years, or after a bachelor's degree, and but it obviously the financial burden that goes with that, it would be great if students had to pay for all of that. And the vast majority of our doctoral students are fully funded for their time at Lehigh. Most of that funding comes off of research grants. So I go back again to my comment about growing our research funding. The biggest impact of that will be to help us grow our doctoral student population, to have the funding to not just cover the tuition for those students, but also to provide them with a living wage so that they can pay for housing and food and all the things that they need to. So it really is employment, and it really is a job. I will say we don't pay PhD students as much as if an undergrad would go out into the working world, but we also provide an amazing education as part of that as well. And so it really is that we see PhD students and postdocs as, it's a dual educational and sort of work mission that they have. And so one thing I didn't mention earlier that's one of my financial priorities moving forward is I would like to get to a point where we fund every PhD student in the college from college funds. So this is the biggest piece of our fundraising campaign right now for the college, is to grow a pool of funds that allow us to pay our first year PhD students. And what that does is it allows students to come in with the comfort of knowing that that first year is covered as they're identifying an advisor, as they're going through a lot of their coursework. And then it gives the students and advisors that first year to really find the right matches and to bring together, to make sure that the student has the advisor who will be best for his or her success, and to work together toward that. And of course, then it also provides the advisors with a cushion that allows them and the departments to recruit more students by having that first year funding. So this is as I said, this is our highest fundraising priority right now in the campaign. And this, so this is one of our commitments to make sure that every doctoral student is funded.
Right. So another question here that's more around some of the research areas. How do you see the thrust areas in engineering being in sync with the SDG focus areas of the Indian government, like clean water, renewable energy, and smart cities?
So, well, as I said a moment ago, I think those areas are areas where we can have, great overlap. Well, let's think about the 3 IRIs, so 3 interdisciplinary research institutes for a moment. In those areas, I have to start with ICPI, right? Cyber physical infrastructure and energy. So the areas that you mentioned, clean water, renewable energy, smart cities, fall right into that space. I mean, the smart infrastructure, smart cities is a central piece of what they're doing. Renewable energy, I mentioned our work in, I mean, it's not the only work we're doing, but the group that we have that's working on hydrokinetic energy, actually with the Department of Energy, and worked with the Department of Energy to help to define a new East Coast center this year around hydrokinetic energy. One of the areas of renewable energy that is well, so many are not fully tapped. And then clean water, it's not an area that we have as much effort, but we definitely have some faculty members who work in that area, our environmental engineering group. And one of our faculty members, Arup Sengupta, for example, spent his sabbatical last year in India working on, he was working on hybrid ion exchange nanotechnology, but it was, but he's one of our environmental engineers and works with the group that's looking at clean water and the like. So we do have some efforts in that space, and we do have some connections with India in the space of environmental engineering. But I don't want to leave the other 2 institutes out for a moment here. If you think about those problems, think of smart cities. The smart word in itself says that data science, intelligent systems has to be a centerpiece of that. iDisk plays a significant role. If you think about areas like water and renewable energy, the materials and devices are a central piece of what has to happen. Just sensors for all of this, right? The sensors that need to be developed for everything from smart cities to clean water are that all falls in that Institute for Functional Materials and Devices. So all of our institutes are really targeted at building these kinds of strengths, and so it's just a wonderful opportunity for them, the institutes, to partner with universities and companies in India.
That's great. See, we just last ones that were some questions I think are getting into really particular questions around graduate situations, graduate stipends, and that people. I'll mention one thing first of all, because it looks like we've got some students who are admitted and are in the process. Just a reminder that we are doing a call tomorrow morning that's much more about, kind of plans for the fall and the spring. And we'll be there to be able to answer some of the immigration questions and some of those pieces. So, afterwards, we can make sure we get you connected to that if you don't have that already on your diary for tomorrow would be tomorrow evening your time, tomorrow morning our time. But where would you tell people to go to get answers to very specific questions about their fellowships, research opportunities, stipends, things that would be very specific to their programs? How would you suggest they go to get that information?
Well, first and foremost, if it's very program specific, I suggest that you go to the graduate coordinator in the department where the program exists.
Right.
So I think that's the best starting point. Those people, you go to the website for the department, and almost all of our programs have an associated department. And so, and all of our PhD programs do. And so I think that's the starting point there. There's also a director of graduate studies in each of those departments who's a faculty member, and the coordinator who's a staff member might point you to that faculty member if you have more technical questions. So I think that's a great way to go. And you can always fall back to reaching out to our office if you're not finding the right connections. And Brianne Lisk, Lisk, who works in my office, is the director, is the staff person who's oversees sort of all the graduate programs in the college for the dean's office. And so Bree is another wonderful resource. But I'll tell you, if you go to Bree and you have specific questions for your particular program, she's going to send you right to the person who knows the most, right? Or the people who know the most in the department and the program. So, but anyway, those are great contact points to get your specific questions answered.
Right. And so, yeah, so I mentioned that because as we're looking at I'm putting Bree's information there in the chat, so everyone has that as just one other point. And I mention that because we are getting some really specific questions, and I want to make sure people know how to get the answers to those, but also recognizing that they are very, very specific to the program. So we want to make sure you're getting in the place to get the correct information for that. I think this has been great, Steve. Thank you so much for time today to just sort of put some context here about what's going on in the College of Engineering. It's exciting developments. I think we've got some alignment here with things that are clearly going to be priorities of the Indian government, and I think ways in which we're really able to prepare students to do well and to be able to return and really make a difference, find employment, and really be successful in their work there. And in fact, it's interesting. We have one alum commented that the local materials and local water cleaning was not there when this person was here at Lehigh. So with that, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining. We will be sharing out the recording to this. For graduate students on the call today, remember that we do have a very specific call tomorrow that will be about particulars of graduate programming and looking both at spring and into the fall. So we can answer some more of those kind of particular questions. But this was great. Thanks, Steve, and really appreciate the time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thanks everybody. We look forward to building these partnerships in India.